Dear friends, today I want to talk to you about why Russians support Putin or opposite. Just Putin does what Russians want. So this is not Putin, this is Russians. Or why is the blood of innocent Ukrainians in the hands of millions of Russians who support Putin? Putin personifies Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine. However, the blood of innocent Ukrainians is also on the hands of millions of Russians who support Putin, and this is why. Just as Germany underwent denazification, Russia must repent for war crimes committed in Ukraine and other countries. Why I am thinking like that, you can find out if you go to Russian YouTube or Facebook and read comments to the groups or videos. If you think these comments can be unreal because they support the war, because they support killing of Ukrainians, and if you think these comments written by Kremlin bots, make a double check in chat roulette or somewhere else where you can speak to Russians. Set your profile to Russian and talk to them. Some of them know English, so in some short time you'll find someone with whom you can speak. What will they tell you? That they have no impact on what is happening. They are not interested in political world, but they will not claim Putin is evil. They will not say Putin is a criminal because they support him in fact. Some of them will tell you, I'm going soon to the war to kill Ukrainians. Some will just stay calm. When Russia occupied Crimea and parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions in 2014, Putin's approval rating reached unprecedented heights. Thus, Russians happily agreed to endure very mild Western sanctions for the sake of a sense of victory and greatness of themselves and their country. In 8 years, Russia turned the flourishing Ukrainian peninsula, Crimea, and cities there, where life was raging, into decayed territories similar to Abkhazia or Transnistria, which is also liberated. If you have never been there, compare the state of nature and infrastructure in Finland and Karelia, which was annexed by Russia from Finland in 1940, or in the Kuril Islands, which belong to Japan and are occupied currently by Russia, or the territory of Kaliningrad Oblast, that formerly was Königsberg, and neighborhood countries, for example, Poland. To understand, Russia develops the occupied lands. I understand no one of you will go to a trip to see confirmation of what I'm saying. So I want to show you that on the map. So first, Finland and Karelia. Let me show you. So here you can see with the red line, you can see Karelia. It's near St. Petersburg in Russia, and currently it is totally Russian territory. But before 1940, it was territory of Finland. And now the border between Finland and Russia goes this way. So what I want to show you, I want to show you the difference. We can see a couple of small of towns or cities somewhere here and in Finland. I'm not sure I can read correctly these all names, so I will just drag the map and send the guy there on just some place to see the difference. So this is Finland. I hope you can see my screen. For me, it looks very nice. It's totally clean, cut grass, nice buildings. And now let's go to Russia. That is formally Russia now, but before it was Finland. So people in Russia, most of them does not live in their own houses, but in these small apartments, 40 square meters or something. But in general, it looks like this. Let's move ahead a little bit. So that's how they live. That's how they manage properties. Looks like abandoned something. Chaos with parking. Yeah, that's it. Now, let's move to another part of Russia, which is here, Kaliningrad Oblast, which is in the middle of Europe and has border with Lithuania and Poland. So this small part was given to Russia as a result of Second World War. And let's see what's going on here. Some strange people like zombies. Chaos. Just now let's move to Poland. I think this city is more or less that much big like previous Russian city. Can you find the difference? For me, it's totally big the difference. So the quality of life undeniably higher in Poland. No chaos. And let's go to other part of the world, Japanese islands. So this is Japan, that currently territories of Japan, and here is the border. These islands have been Japanese as well in the before the World War II, and I want to show you how people live in this town. Yeah, this town looks more or less good. Yeah, shopping mall. But this abandoned territory, house with parking, with garbage, still exist. Yeah, And now let's go to Japanese. I think this city is more or less the same like. You see how much is better? So this is the difference in between occupied and unoccupied territories that normally Russia do not um, do not support when they are occupied. Now, I want to continue and just a kind reminder, dear friends, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the video. And support, please support. This is important to share the information. Send to the people you know in text messengers and on Facebook. And if you want to support me with this job, in the details down below, you may find my PayPal address. Let's move ahead. After Putin launched a full-scale war in Ukraine on February 24, 2022, his approval ratings, can you believe that, soared again. Different polls give slightly different numbers, but on average, it's about 70% that Russians support the Russian invasion and a Russian war against Ukraine. If you look at their social networks, you can see that with a few exceptions, most are worried about not being able to pay with a card or buy a hamburger, and not that their country is killing Ukrainian children. Moreover, they believe that Ukrainian Nazi, with support of NATO, dragged Russia into the war, and we are only defending ourselves on the territory of other countries. How this correlates with the fact that the Russian army is killing Ukrainians on Ukrainian soil is not clear. But as Goebbels, Nazi leader Goebbels, said that more incredible a lie is, the sooner it will be believed. Russian propaganda is very effective. Part of its effectiveness is explained by the fact that it resonates with the deep beliefs of Russians. After all, about a week ago, they had access to all Ukrainian and world mass media, many of which have a Russian language version. However, they choose to believe their TV and opinion leaders. The share of Russians who do not support the war is small, and the number of active protesters is generally small compared to the population of Russia. So when the war began, different numbers say it was a kind of 15,000 protesters comparing to 140 million people living in Russia. However, equating Ukrainian nationalists with fascists began much earlier by Russia, at least since the Second World War, when UPA fought simultaneously against Hitler and Stalin. Indeed, in 1941, some Ukrainians hoped that German army would free them from the horrors of Bolshevism, but they were very quickly realized that it was a mistake. However, Soviet and later Russian propaganda carefully portrayed Ukrainians as Nazi collaborators, despite the fact that about 1 million Russians served in the ranks of the Wehrmacht and the SS compared to several thousand Ukrainians. Another pillar of Russian propaganda is the idea of Moscow as the third and last Rome, which was born in the 1510s. The idea of messianism of Russians and their superiority over other nations. This narrative and its various versions is inherent to Russians and what was imposed to other peoples of the Russian Empire and USSR. With the help of many tools, forced Russification, explicit or implicit discrimination, for example, national quotas for administration to higher education institutions, suppression of national languages and cultures simultaneously with the planting of the narrative that Russian literature and culture are superior to all others, repressions against of appropriation of national intellectual elites, and many other. Just one example that I can give you is that during Soviet Union occupation in Ukraine, up to 1991, Russian language teacher received much more salary than teacher of math, teacher of computer science, or teacher of other languages. Even the head of the school, director of the school, received less money than Russian language teacher. Russia continues to produce outright lies, not only for its own population. She is not ashamed to utter the lie from the highest world platforms. Thus, the representative of Russia in the United Nations Security Council declared to the whole world that Russia protests the people of Donbass from Ukrainian Nazis, and the Russian army does not kill civilians. At a meeting with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine on March 10th, his Russian colleague lied that the maternity hospital in Mariupol, which the Russians bombed on March 9th, was a military base of nationalists, and the photos of women and babies did not take into account the contrary opinion. While the ministers held tasks, the Russian army continued to bomb and shell residential areas, killing dozens of people. All-out war today has become possible in part because for the past 8 years, Western countries have been asking alongside Russian propaganda, what can Ukraine do to end the war? To be fair, some Ukrainian politicians ask the same question. The answer Russia expects is to exist and become part of Russia. However, the correct answer is to defeat Russia. 92% of Ukrainians believe in victory because now not only the Ukrainian army is fighting the enemy, but the whole country. The only question is the price of victory. I think it is already clear that it is not only about Ukraine, it is about the security of the whole world. Therefore, by helping Ukraine to win, other countries are helping themselves. Or do you think it is still not bothering you that Russia shares nuclear weapons? And a good example is that they plan to send a new nuclear weapon to Belarus. Standing with Ukraine today means joining the victory over Russia. And two last comments. First, you should not hope for a mutiny in Russia. First of all, it is very unlikely, but more importantly, If Putin is replaced by someone more competent and less corrupt, the world will be in even greater danger. Secondly, one should not hope for a popular uprising in Russia. As mentioned above, the vast majority of Russians support the war. A survey recently published by the Navalny Foundation that Russians are beginning to understand that Russia is the aggressor is not representative, as it was conducted only in Moscow and via the internet. In reality, we see that several thousand people from Moscow out of 15 million go to anti-war rallies, whereas during the Revolution of Dignity in Kyiv, with a population of 4.5 million, a million people took to the streets. Moreover, even among the progressive people surveyed by Navalny, only 36% admit that Russia is to blame for the war. Now is unique time for the civilized world to show that it can defend its values and defeat a state that uses Western institutions to undermine those values. Do not ask what consequences Ukraine can make for the sake of a trust. You've been doing this too long. Don't suggest any ways to save face for Putin. You have done it in hundreds of times. Do not feel sorry for the Russian grandmothers, as they don't feel sorry for Ukrainian children. For the free world to win, Russia must lose. Its population must bear responsibility. The Russians must go through denazification in the same way that the Germans went through it after the Second World War. No one who worked for the Russian state or received any benefits from it should be able to enjoy life in democratic countries. We explained how to achieve this here, how to structure sanctions here and here. We also wrote that the fear of escalation due to the introduction of a no-fly zone over Ukraine is unfounded, and that the already adopted resolution of the United Nations General Assembly is a sufficient legal justification for its introduction. It's now or never. The Ukrainian army and people proved that Russia is strong only when it fights with unarmed women and children. The West must decide whether it will continue to allow or whether it will support humanism in practice, not just in words. Thank you.